Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Pirate Rugby podcast. Thank you so much to our 200 YouTube subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting us, guys. Our next goal is 250. So if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, please hit the button. It really helps us out. If you leave a comment, we always reply to everybody. So get in the mixer and have a discussion with us. We really love it. Don't forget, you can also get this podcast in audio format on both Apple and Spotify. Our last podcast was our most listened to one yet, so thank you so much to everybody for that. If you drop us a review, it really helps us grow. We also have a Substack, which you can check out. All the links for that will be in the description boxes below. You can click on it. You can see long form written content that we do and links to all of our latest videos and things and our socials and all of that. This week, I don't have my friend and colleague Enda with me. Unfortunately, he has commitments in real life, but I've got an equally capable and equally Irish Caolan Scully joining me tonight. How are you, Caolan?
I've been better, I won't lie. It's been a rough couple of days. No one likes to be starting a new job and dealing with the grief of another quarter-final loss at the same time. But you know what? The URC is back. The World Cup is only for scrubs. We'll motor on.
Exactly. Have New Zealand ever won the URC? That's my question.
That's it. I have England. We might get into that another time.
We'll talk about that another time. Anyway, let's do our moments of the week, mate. Do you have a specific moment you look back on over the last week of rugby and think, yes, that's what does it for me?
This is gonna seem very basic, but rugby is the moment of the week. Like, I've never been so enthralled and so heartbroken in one weekend. Like, you start with Wales, Argentina, and I'll hold my hand up here. I was rooting for Wales in an empty pub and no one was really watching it. We all were, actually. All five of us were rooting for Wales. I'll give you that. Not the commonplace in Ireland. And it just, even though it wasn't the greatest game, it was utterly enthralling. You didn't know what was coming next. You think about Dyer and his break. You think about the intercept by Nico Sanchez. A load of moments. Bigger going off injured felt huge. Bigger not kicking the points to make it 13-0 felt huge, and so on and so forth. Then Ireland, New Zealand. We won't talk about that, but it was a great game. I think that's fair to say.
It was an epic
England,
game.
it was epic. It was unbelievable, and I couldn't fault the Irish team. Like, from minute, not even minute one, from minute -10 when they came out for the anthems and the figure of eight for the haka to the end and dying with their boots on. Like, I could not fault that team. Then England, Fiji. Fiji so close to winning it. Fiji should have won it. Like, we discussed it on my own podcast. Fiji really should have won that. How often do you see a team with such a dominant scrum, that dominant that they actually don't end up winning and they don't get changed from it? It's rare. England should be counting their blessings.
Yeah.
If only they had a nice scrummaging team to play against next week, but they don't. They have South Africa to come. We get into that as well. And then France South Africa is possibly the greatest game of rugby I've ever watched. And I've been watching rugby a long time. I'm sure there's listeners of yours who'll say, no, it's X or Y, it's Super Rugby or Curry Cup or Welsh Premiership or whatever it is. I don't know. But listen, it was utterly fascinating from minute one. Like, literally from minute one. It was like it was playing times two speed. And rugby was the winner. And it's promised to rain all weekend in Paris this weekend. Again for another weekend of World Cup semi-finals, but we got our finals last week. We got absolutely unbelievable entertainment. Like, you couldn't ask for more.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things about the Ireland All Blacks game is when it finished, you're like, we've got another one of these tomorrow. And I think everyone was confident, like the one tomorrow is going to be as good as this. It's like a festival with two headline acts of both of your favorite bands. And yeah, it was incredible. My moment of the week came from the Sunday night game. It's an obvious one. It's not niche, I like to be niche, but this isn't niche at all. It's South Africa opting for a scrum off the mark because I think everyone who was
How
reclining on
often
this,
have you seen that in your life?
I've never seen it. And and I was reclining on my sofa like many people were who weren't in the stadium. And I think as soon as they opt for the mark, everyone just sort of leant forward and were like, what's gonna happen here? What are they gonna do? Because it clearly wasn't just like a Visa was just like, yeah, call a mark and call for a scrum. It was like we've discussed this. This is a plan. Everyone's looking up to Razzie to see what colour light he's waving. Like, And then, of course, Razzie comes out and explains it later. And everything he said made perfect sense. You don't get to scrum against France very much. It's still very South African. Most teams don't go, we want to scrum more, but that's the DNA of the box. So he comes out and said, you don't get to scrum France very much. So we wanted to do that. And they love a long kicking battle. So if we'd have marked it and then kicked it back to them, they love that. That's what they live for. And their forwards will just stand on the halfway line, wait for whoever makes a mistake, and then walk to the line out. So we wanted to get their forwards in a scrum and tire them out. And you're like, this man is a genius. I know it's when he says it like that, it sounds like, oh yeah, oh obviously that, yeah, it feels like I could have thought of it, but obviously you couldn't. And yeah, and it was a proper what's name measuring contest as well, wasn't it? It was like, let's come on, let's find out who the real winner of this is. And then my supplementary moment is the tap and go for Etzebeth's try, when in that game state where Umbanombi has the ball down and he's looking around at the back and they all start lining up. You're like, no, surely not. And then they do it, and Etzebeth just goes like, give me the ball, lads, and he takes about 10 Frenchmen over the try line with him.
No, it was an unbelievable score as well, wasn't it? Like,
Yeah.
I know it was up against Jalibert, and that's kind of, Jalibert is not the world's greatest tackler, but like, it's just Etzebeth at his best. He picks a weakness. He was unbelievable on the night, and it's such a non-Premiership thing to say, but I'm so happy he's not togging out in Thomond Park this weekend. I would not want. He is one of the greatest rugby players of this generation. I don't want to play him because he's that good. He makes the Sharks that much better.
Yeah. Oh my God. Does he still play for the? Has he moved? Does he still play for the Sharks? I thought he might have moved because he was Toulon like a year ago. I think he was close quite a lot.
It was definitely with the Sharks last year.
Yeah, he was, because he lost at Parky Scarlets when Sam Costello didn't know.
Yeah, he's still at the Sharks. So
he's still at the Sharks. Cool.
There's 15 seconds for people to jump over.
Right. Anyway, so let's talk about rugby some more. So, from your point of view, then, mate, as an Ireland fan, you talked about your dealing with the grief of it. Where does this leave Ireland now? Is this, some journalists have come out and said we need to rebuild, we need to wipe the slate clean, or is this a kind of a you fell off your horse, you get back on it, and you carry on riding type of situation?
You absolutely carry on. Like, I don't care how many faces of media come out and say these things on Off the Ball or on content stealing platforms. I really couldn't give a shit about this rebuild rubbish. You don't rebuild after you lose by 4 points to an All Blacks team who were unbelievable. If that happened, we'd have no Lions series since 2005, for instance.
Ooh. Zero handling errors from the All Blacks. They were, apart from Georgie Barrett missing a kick, they were perfect.
Yeah. Like Sam Cane and Artie Surveyor had probably both of their best games in an All Black shirt. And that's saying something, because Artie Surveyor has had a lot of great games over the last 5 years in particular. I think if you want to talk about rebuild, right, you probably are looking at rugby as a barbarian or NFL concept. Realistically, is the same thing gets brought up after every loss, or before you play Italy in the Six Nations, or before you have that like one autumn game against maybe Japan or Fiji or whatever. That's not sport. Like, sport is not this. It's not Jonah Loma Rugby Challenge. I wish it was sometimes, because it would make games more entertaining from time to time. But that's not what it is. And Ireland will not be rebuilding. I think from what I'm hearing, and I want to phrase this correctly so people don't think I'm above my station or anything, but from what I'm hearing, there might be one more retirement.
Right.
But like, that's only one. Do you know what I mean? So like, you're not you're losing 3 players out of a 33-man squad. One of them very replaceable. No disrespect to Keith Earls, but very replaceable, because we have wingers of his standard. Sexton, not so much. And another player who probably would be replaceable because of the position they play in. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And like, you're kind of in that ballpark. So like, is that cause for a rebuild? No. Like, even as it stands, when people say it, they say, who's going to be captain? Who's going to be 10? I'm like, why don't we just give captaincy to Peter O'Mahony and take the pressure off for a year, so that someone like Pete at this stage of his career, he'll be like, yeah, it's an honor, but like, it's fine. Like, and then the attention moves away from, say, James Ryan. James Ryan will be Ireland captain next year. I think we can They can say that safely. But I would rather see someone like O'Mahony or even a Rob Herring, for instance, even though he probably wouldn't start, take the captaincy and just take the pressure off, or an Ian Henderson. And then we're not talking about James Ryan is captain, James Ryan is captain, James Ryan is captain. And just finally on that, like, Ireland played unbelievable rugby in that game. I understand they started slow, and I understand there was areas of the New Zealand game that were flagged beforehand by people who know way more about the game than you or I, and that's saying something. Like, if I'm throwing that out about yourself for myself, they flagged certain things, especially on the breakdown, how narrow they got just to suffocate Ireland at breakdown time. Like, they really got narrow, and it worked. But again, if Ireland play Fiji, England, Argentina, Wales at the weekend, and probably 60% of the time they beat the other three teams on their side to draw. So, like, do we really throw the toys out of the pram over that? So, like, it's complete result bias to say, and even the whole thing of, well, Johnny Sexton was still on the pitch. It's like, yeah, but two of the line breaks, he was the one who made the pass. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying Jack Crowley wouldn't. Jack Crowley is a fine player, but, like, it's complete, hindsight bias.
I thought Ireland's attack in that last phase was amazing. When Johnny Sexton was running the ball, you didn't know whether he was going to go into contact, whether he was going to give the short ball on the crash line or put it out the back. And that was what makes it extra amazing that the All Blacks kept them out. This is for it reminds me, you mentioned off the ball. I've watched many an off the ball video after Leinster lose a semi-final, and they completely lose their minds. And I'm like, sometimes teams lose matches. Like, it
Genuinely.
happens.
That is exactly what this is. Sometimes teams lose, and it's the same for France. Like, France, there was a piece in one of the local papers today about what kind of squad they'll see in 2027. But even that doesn't feel as bad, because we knew that Dupont and Entimac and Aldrich and Woki and Flamon and so on and so forth. We knew all those guys are going to be there anyway. So, like, that makes no difference. I think for Ireland, we're just so obsessed with 4-year cycles on the one weekend that proved 4-year cycles are a load of bullshit.
Well, this is what I was about to ask you. So that was literally going to be my next question. So I have, ever since Wayne Pivac and Eddie Jones got sacked last year, I am done with 4-year cycles, because there we got two coaches who were obsessed, and every time their nation lost, every time they, as coaches, lost a game, they'd say, it's all about the World Cup, mate. We're building nicely for the World Cup. And it's like, we just lost to Italy and Georgia. We're building nicely for the World Cup. So I've very much come out against that. So are you the same? Is the 4-year cycle is building for a World Cup, which we've seen this weekend are decided on whose thigh is in the right place?
Yeah. No,
is it a fallacy?
It is. It's complete fallacy. Like, how can you predict in 4 years' time who's going to be your form player? You look back 4 years ago, Jack Crowley hadn't even played Ireland under 20s. Jameson Gibson Park was nowhere near his best stuff. I could go 1 to 23. Andrew Porter was not at Loosehead. Dan Sheehan missed out on the Leinster Academy 4 years ago. Tyburn, James Ryan, fair enough. You could see that happening. Peter O'Mahony, people wrote him off. Not even 4 years ago, but 8 years ago, because he's that type of player. People were saying Josh van der Fleer hadn't enough bastardy about him as recently as about 3 years ago. No one knew who Caolan Doris was until this block of fixtures of URC, where he really took centre stage. Nobody said Sexton would be at this World Cup. We probably all thought one of Aki or Ringrose or Henshaw would miss out. No one even knew who Matt Hansen was. Never mind being on the radar, they didn't know who he was. People didn't think James Lowe was good enough, and Hugo Keenan was off playing sevens. So tell me now how we're supposed to predict an Irish side for 4 years' time when I couldn't have even told you half this team were 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's absolute rubbish.
Look at the box. I mean, Manny Lebock being the star man for them, and he's been absolutely tearing it up for the Stormers for the last 2 years in the URC. That's not a 4-year plan. If Andre Pollard hadn't got injured, maybe Lebock wouldn't be the starter right now.
The flip side is maybe Chris Smith of the Bulls would have been the starter.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't actually know, because we've nothing to go off.
And the fact that Lebock is in, that's then changed LaRue, because LaRue is a partner with Pollard, whereas Lebock's partner is now Willemse. And then you got
Yeah.
the two wingers. This Colby Ardenser partnership on the wings, I've got the stats for it, is basically box fresh. It's basically not been a thing until this summer just gone. So yeah, like you say, there's no, I don't believe in 4-year cycles anymore. There was a time where I did, and I also don't. If a coach starts saying, "Oh, it's all about building for a World Cup," it's like that's a
That's
red
probably
flag for
the
me
that's
from there.
probably the red flag. Yeah, it's probably the alarm bells going off, and because of that, I expect one of the losing coaches. Well, maybe not Checa because he's out of a contract. One of the losing coaches, and I think you can hear which way I'm going to go with this because Rasmus is going to be staying on. Ian Foster's out of a job, and Michael Checa probably won't be the Argentina boss in a year's time. But I feel like one of them will talk about 4 years' time. Just saying.
Yes,
Subtlety
I
isn't
agree.
great, isn't a great thing on a podcast, but look, make them work first.
Well, we'll come to a talking point slightly later. Anyway, so you touched on retirements just there, and obviously the main man for Ireland who is retiring. They're all main men, but the mainest of the men for you would be Johnny Sexton. So just give me your summary of what his legacy is for you and for what he means to you personally as a player.
I'm going to give you something now that you could get for $9.99 a month at a certain Irish publication. Johnny Sexton is one of our best players of all time. There is no disputing this. We said this back in March. We said this now. It does not change. The question is Johnny Sexton our best player ever? And I would have him ahead of O'Driscoll. Genuinely. I think
Really?
Brian O'Driscoll and even Keith Wood to an extent benefited from being the flash player, a very rare world class player on a poor team. And that happens in generations. Like Stuart Hogg is a great player, but he benefited from that a bit as well because Scotland were never a top 3 team until the last 2 years of his international career. So that kicks in for players. And I think O'Driscoll had a bit of that. Fine player, wonderful defender, wonderful attacker, had a bit of everything. But you think of Sexton's leadership, his mentality, his career progression. Like he didn't get on with Michael Checa when he was in the academy. But by Checa's last year, he was his starting out half. Like you even compare that, say, now to a Jack Crowley, and I'm using this example because I know his story better than anyone else's. He has impressed Munster coaches since they got into the building. Like it's not the same. Sexton was the fiery type. He reminds me of the old Paul McGinley quote, "I want you to have pointy elbows." Sexton pushes everyone out of the way. He is the man, and he's okay with that. And we will go through a period more than likely where we have guys, but we've had 22 years now of the guy. It has been Ron O'Gara followed by Johnny Sexton. And the fact that Sexton eclipsed O'Gara, who had Grand Slam winning drop goal, 2 Heineken Cup wins, a few Triple Crowns, like at that time, that is unbelievable. He's gone on to win 2 Heineken Cups, which maybe Sexton won't thank him for. But like the fact that Sexton has eclipsed that as a player is phenomenal. What he's done for Leinster, he's made Leinster a better organization. I genuinely feel if he retired in say 2019, they don't get to 2 Heineken Cup finals and lose 2 semi-finals by a couple of points. Or was it a quarter-final they lost to Saracens in actually? Like I don't think they do because he's that good. And you see it, Ross Byrne might be all as good as Sexton is in terms of just purely 80 minutes of rugby right now. But Sexton's leadership, we talked about his ability to pick a pass, his ability to bring players into the game, to almost take the attention onto himself, to carry the moment. And even like the last day, yeah, he missed a penalty and it's unfortunate and it changed what Ireland were going for at the end. But even as a strong Munster fan, I did not want anyone else on the field for Ireland at 10 other than Johnny Sexton. Like that's
Yeah,
it. Like I'm not the most biased fan. I am more partial than others. But you don't want anyone else. You want the very best players on the pitch at all times. And Johnny Sexton for me is our best player. Did I always love him? No, because I was a kid when he broke onto the scene and took Ron O'Gara's jersey. That's fine. I think it's okay for kids to have those reactions.
absolutely.
But he's been phenomenal. He has never let Ireland down, or at least not since he was only a kid himself in the jersey. his career is incredible. His accolades are incredible. If he goes into coaching, I think he'd be a good coach. I'd have the same.
I wouldn't want to be coached by him.
No,
Just
well, I didn't want to be coached with Ron O'Gara either, and he made it work because he
yeah,
decided it's not about me, it's about what's around me and what other people think. And Sexton could as well because
yeah.
he has softened in his old age, you could say, as Ireland
Has
captain
he?
as well. Ah, he has. He has. He's definitely a happier, smilier man in Ireland camp than a couple of years ago, and it's a great pity he bowed out like this. But how often does sport have a fairy tale? Paul O'Connell's
Yeah,
last action on rugby pitch was leaving on a stretcher. Do you know? Yeah, McCaw and Carter had
yeah. I was about to say
one
you can't
glance.
all be McCaw and Carter.
Yeah, but they're the exception. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Johnny Wilkinson's last game for England. Does anyone remember it? Do you know what I mean? Like, if he never goes to Toulon, people forget about Johnny Wilkinson about 4 years earlier. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm not saying we fully forget about it, but you understand my point. And that's what sport is. Very few go out on top. And to be fair, for Sexton to lose a quarter final to an unbelievable New Zealand team, jokes aside, is pretty much the top of the game. It's just not the top
It
honour, and
was.
that's a shame.
Yeah, I'm kind of going through that with John Fox at the moment because he's very clearly not the player he was, and we are. There's a few Scarlets fans who are surprised that he's not chucked the towel in at the moment. So, but yeah, anyway. This isn't a John Fox discussion. So, what your point about Sexton and being the star in an amazing team? It is remarkable that it's a world #1 team with um, players who were Rugby World Player of the Year who weren't Johnny Sexton in it, and contenders who will be that this year. And yet, still, there was a feeling that if Sexton got injured, that was game over for Ireland. So to be
Well,
that insane,
some of that is a bit false. Like if Johnny Sexton gets injured against South Africa, do we beat Scotland? Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
well, yeah.
Yeah, we do. Don't try
No,
and
I
act
think you do.
partial.
I think you do. That's not my point. Anyway, okay, carry
But like
on.
that's like yeah, he's Johnny Sexton. He is uber important. I'd probably flip it the other, even go further than that. Is Johnny Sexton at the moment? Take this World Cup and the 2023 calendar year. Is Johnny Sexton the best 10 in the world? He's probably right there. Even if you say no, he's not. Like, can you really say Libok is the best 10 in the world, for instance? Definitely not.
No, I
You
wouldn't say
can't really
Libok
say
or Moanga.
no. You can't really say someone like Entimac because I know Entimac had injuries, so did Sexton, but Entimac blew hot and cold. Like he literally had a hot and cold 5 minutes for Toulouse before he had the greatest top 14 winning try of all time, probably. Um, do you say Farrell or Ford? I don't think you do because you look at their club record this year; it was pretty poor. You know, by Saracen standards, I should add, and by Ford standards, and by England standards in the Six Nations, you definitely don't say someone like Marcus Smith. You don't say someone. I think Biggar maybe, but Biggar was on a very poor Wales team. I think he was at his standard, but it's hard to judge off of that. So yeah, Sexton is right there as the best 10 in the world at the moment at 39 years of age, 38 years of age. Like you can't ask for any more. People will ask for more, but you can't.
Well, no. So here's what I think Sexton's unexpected legacy will be. Well, I say unexpected. I think in years, like decades time, you and I will be watching a rugby match, and a 10 will run a loop behind a centre, and we'll go, "It's a Sexton loop,"
Oh
and all the
god,
kids will
that's
be like,
still happening with the Brumbies of yesteryear before I was born.
but all the kids will be like, "What is that?" Or it will be like a Gary Owen, and people just say, "Oh, he's run the Sexton loop," and people won't even know who Sexton was.
Yeah,
People will just be like, "It's just called a Sexton loop," and no one knows why it's called a Sexton loop, but we will because we were there.
and it's
Dan
funny
Biggar
because
started running them, by the way, in his last couple of years for Wales. Dan Biggar started doing Sexton loops.
yeah, well, I never said Dan Biggar was a bad player. I'd like that to be known externally. Now, I don't mean here tonight, but externally, I always rated Biggar. But it should probably be said on the Gary Owen. Gary Owen are a real tough club. The fact that a kick is named after them is somewhat ironic. So maybe if the Sexton is less about the loop and more about a last minute drop goal in France, so be it. You know what I mean?
Or just taking ages to take a kick or something like that.
Yeah, but listen, at least he never got done by the
Never got
clock.
no, that is true. Anyway, so you mentioned him there. So 1-10 left the stage, and that was Johnny Sexton. The other 10 There's my 10 who left the stage, which is Dan Biggar. I think it's fair to say, on balance, that Sexton's career peaked higher than Biggar's because he was obviously World Player of the Year and had more European club success than Dan Biggar. So far, you never know what Dan might go on to do with Toulon in the next couple of years, because they've got quite an amazing team. But I was doing a bit of research on Dan, and I posted a thread on Twitter about him. And I think what makes Dan Biggar incredible and what makes him really endearing is, unlike Johnny Sexton, who was the guy for his whole career, apart from when he was briefly emerging under Rog, Biggar never really was the guy. He
Wrongly so, to some degree, I think you could say, because he was always good enough.
He very nearly lost the Wales number 10 jersey on a few occasions. So he got his first cap in 2008, and they didn't really get another run in the Wales jersey until 2013 when Rhys Priestland got injured. And then he kind of kept it for a few years after that. And then Anscombe comes along in 2019. Well, Anscombe came along before that, but Anscombe managed to stay fit long enough to become Wales 10 in 2019. So Biggar was down to wearing the 22 jersey. And then Anscombe gets injured again, and then Biggar comes back. So Biggar was the only member of the 30 points to 3 Wales team that didn't go on the Lions tour in 2013.
Jesus.
He then went on the Lions tour in 2017, but didn't play a test minute. He then went on the Lions tour in 2021 and started every single game. That is really quite bizarre when you think about it, to not peak until later on. And you had all the hype around Finn. And obviously there was not controversy, but the discussion around Caolan not taking Sexton. And Farrell was still there. Farrell was still around doing Farrell things. And Biggar had managed to go from not good enough to even go on the trip to number 1. And it took him 8 years, but he got there. And then after that, Pivac made him Wales captain. So he's gone from initially under Gatland not getting an opportunity to being Wales captain and to being the de facto first name on the team sheet. And I just think, all the people who, including the normal crop of 70s Welsh rugby players who like to write a column every other week with no insight into the game whatsoever. And they go, oh, Biggar doesn't run enough. He doesn't do a sidestep. He doesn't do whatever. Look at all of the successful 10s over the last 10, 15 years. You got Johnny Sexton, Owen Farrell, Andre Pollard, the latter end of Johnny Wilkinson at Toulon. They are in the same mold. They are controlling 10s. They're kicking 10s. They are not runners. They are not steppers. Probably the exceptions to the rule would be Bowden Barrett, who is tenure in the All Blacks number 10 jersey isn't as long as people think. And now we've got a new generation of Untamax and LeBox, and hopefully Costellos and Crowleys and things coming through now. But Dan Biggar was an excellent contemporary number 10, and he is, in my opinion, comfortably Wales's best 10 of the professional era. Probably ahead of Stephen Jones.
I'd agree. And this isn't again, I would have been young when Stephen Jones was on the scene, but I would have grown up watching Dan Biggar because he was young. He was at the Ospreys, a very good Ospreys team as well when he was coming through, which really helped because he'd lads like Mike Phillips, James Hook, even Tommy Bowe as a auxiliary centre from time to time, Lee Byrne back at full back. He'd great pieces around him, and I always felt like Biggar was going to go on to do great things. I always felt like Jones had reached his seat. He got the most out of what he could. Biggar just always improved, in my opinion. And I barely seen him live, to be honest, because anytime I went to an Ireland Wales game, he seemed to be injured. But he was just one of those guys. It's well, we can't be conceding 7 kickable penalties against the Ospreys. They're going to win, and that is part of it. He was an unbelievable servant. He was an unbelievable player. And I think it's important sometimes to get the outside perspective. Not big enough, my view, but a lot of Irish would agree that Biggar was a key fulcrum of the Ospreys team that was successful, and the Ospreys team of kind of after that golden generation. And that's kind of what you'll remember from, yes, incredible Wales career as well, don't get me wrong, but you remember him being a star point in the Ospreys and a crucial part of Wales. And that's kind of the least you can, not the least, but probably the most you could ask for actually as a 10.
And then he went on to Northampton and developed his passing game and started, I think he probably surprised a lot of people, not including himself, of how easily he was able to shine for Northampton and how he was pretty much their best player as soon as he walked in the door, and how I think he surprised a lot of people in England. And for all the stick he gets inside Wales for the kind of 10 years, you don't hear that stick from outside of Wales. Everyone goes like, oh yeah, Dan Biggar, he's the guy. So he didn't win anything with Northampton, but his stock went up.
Nobody would, to be honest.
All right, okay. And then now he's gone to Toulon, and you look at that Toulon team, like I said, he's got Naithalevu and Duncan Bayawa playing in the midfield behind him. What a team. I can't wait to watch that in the top 14 this year.
I was at that Challenge Cup final this year when they absolutely trounced the Ospreys, and the Ospreys' dream centre partnership that we always hear about. Glasgow, sorry about that. I actually wouldn't have celebrated for too long if they played the Ospreys and supported the Ospreys. Munster fans don't support Glasgow, for people who don't know. But was at that game, and Naithalevu and his centre partner, his name slips my mind. You might give it to me there.
Payawa,
yeah, they were unbelievable that night. They were literally unmarkable against this supposedly great centre pairing. And Biggar will have a lot of enjoyment with those two, because he will get great go forward ball, and he'll have lads like Villiers that he could just kick him behind to. Even if Villiers doesn't win a kick in behind, say, he could actually win the jackal turnover. I think Biggar's going to have a lot of fun with lads like that around him in the later end of his career. I don't think he'll win a Hiding Cup with them or anything, but I think he'll do well there.
Yeah, and the fans already love him. The Toulon fans already love him, from what I see on Twitter. So that's those two. Let's now talk about what most of our subscribers here on Pirate Rugby want us to talk about, and that's Fiji. So Fiji, au revoir Fiji. So I'm going to share my screen now. I've got a few stats, and I've got a new background on my PowerPoint slide. So there's two things I love, Caolan. It's Fiji and PowerPoints. So I made a PowerPoint about Fiji. So I'm going to share my screen, mate. Give me a shout when you can see it.
Not yet. There. Here we go. Oh, okay. It's not quite Fiji and Drua, but it'll do.
So for our audio listeners, if you want to jump onto our YouTube, we'll probably post this out as a clip as well. You can see all of the visuals and all the stats and things, but I'll read them out anyway, so you'll hopefully get the picture. So Fiji were the best tier 2 ranked team at the World Cup. They got out of the group. I don't think that's a controversial statement. Frank Lamani was their top points scorer. They didn't actually have that many tries, they had a lot of different try scorers. They didn't have anyone sort of banging them in for them, like centre forward style. So they had 2 players on 2 tries each, and then everybody else had 1 try, which I think gives us an insight into Fiji's attack is still quite vibes based, in that it's not like a strike play and then either the winger is put away in the corner, a la Josh Adams or Lewis Rees-Zammit, or the scrum half is on the cheat line and the scrum half grounds it. It's still very much whoever's there scores the try, and that's why they get a big diversity of try scorers. But they only scored 12 tries in the whole World Cup. And to give you a bit of context, Samoa scored 13 and Tonga scored 11. So that's just shows you that maybe that is the next stage of development for this Fiji team, is to get their attack more refined. But you can't talk about Fiji's attack without talking about these two, Radradra and Naithalevu. So as far as I can tell, these two have only started 2 games for Fiji in the centre together. Can you believe that? They started the last warm-up game against England, and they started the first game against Wales, and then Radradra went to the wing. Now, in the quarter-final, Radradra and Tuisova swapped. So Radradra moved to the centre in the second half. And I mean, just look at these stats, like 11 carries for Radradra, 9 for Naithalevu, 78 metres, 70 metres, 7 defenders beaten, 5 defenders beaten. We're going to talk about England's backline in a bit. These two beat as many defenders as the entire England backline did in that game. So, and then you got 2 line breaks.
To be fair, you try tackling these guys.
Oh my God, Marcus Smith tried. We'll talk about him later. So yeah, and Naithalevu's leadership has just been inspirational in this World Cup. Radradra in this game went full Radradra and was unplayable, but Naithalevu's leadership for this team and what he's brought. I mean, he didn't score a try off it, but I'll never forget his run against Australia in the last minutes of the game to get them down onto the 5 meter line, where he was just absolutely, he'd been on the pitch obviously for the best part of 80 minutes at this point, and he just put his head down and he ran. And it's kind of like, I know these two are over 30 now. I don't have their exact ages, and people have been talking about Raja being on a decline. I just hope we haven't seen these two play together for the last time. I just hope that, the rumours of Fiji joining the Rugby Championship, I hope we get to see these two tear it up for at least a couple more years, because the rugby world needs to see these two play together, because my goodness, like this is what rugby is about.
Bring Radradra back to Toulon. Get the band back together.
Yes. Where is he gone now? Can you quickly check for me in the background while I talk about Bossia?
Radradra, is he not still at Bristol?
No, he's left Bristol because they've got Ravovo and Vakatawa now.
Oh so yeah, I don't watch that sport. Oh, he's gone to Toulon. Or sorry, not Toulon, Leon.
Yeah. Okay, so it is Leon. I thought it might be Leon. So cool. So that will be
poor Connacht. Connacht got them in Europe this year. Enda will not be happy.
Yeah, so that will be a south of France derby between Toulon and Leon, though. It's definitely worth watching. Hope that's on Viaplay. Anyway, so Botti is the other key man. Botti is one of those players who's so good, like it's not interesting to talk about how good he is. Like I think he started 3 games and played in all 5. Meters 74. This is for a loose forward. 74 meters, 48 tackles, 44 carries. For every game that he started, he was the top tackler and the top carrier for Fiji in those games. 29 passes.
That's elite back row level, like world class back row.
Yeah, I mean, but our friend Jade, shout out Jade if you're listening, asked, is he a World Player of the Year nominee? And you're like, runner up in the top 14, back-to-back European Championships, arguably the best player in the best ever Fiji side. Yeah, I'd say he's a nominee. He's worth a nomination.
Himself and Aldrit could get it.
Yeah.
To La Rochelle. I know he doesn't play back row for La Rochelle, but
he does sometimes. But Aldrit is a good shout. Aldrit in that first game against New Zealand, his stats were stupid. Like,
yeah, he was my contender if France won at the weekend. He was my favorite, but now I have no idea.
It'll probably anyway. Well, that's a chat for another pod.
Anyway. It won't be a prop. That's all we know, folks. It will not be a prop.
7 turnovers won, 7 defenders beaten, 5 offloads, 1 line break, 1 try assist. This is like, again, I say it again, it's a loose forward. There's not supposed to be like this. And if you look at him as well, he's kind of an odd shape. Like, and to think that he's, when the number on your back gets smaller, it's normally a bad sign. If you go from a 12 to a 7, that's normally a sign that something's gone badly wrong, but it hasn't. It's gone very right for Bossia. But speaking of things that could have gone wrong, what about this guy, Caleb Muntz?
Yeah.
So Frank Lamani was Fiji's top point scorer in the World Cup with 34 points. Caleb Muntz got 15 points in the last warm-up game alone. So nearly 50% of that.
Yeah.
But Batitu was a lot better against England than he was against Portugal. And his kicking for touch was better and he was exciting ball in hand. But he was playing like a centre because he is a centre. He was Fiji's top carrier against England, which is not what you want from your fly half necessarily. And yeah, Teller being injured was a huge blow. I think they'd have been okay. They might have even beaten England if they had Teller. But not having Muntz, I think, was a huge miss for their World Cup entirely. I think, it's if, buts, and maybes, and we don't know for sure, but they could well have beaten Wales if Muntz was there. And they could well have not lost to Portugal because they would have rested Muntz, but Teller would have been fit and available. And then, obviously, the game against England. It's a case of what if. The good news is that he's a young kid and he's going to be around for a long time and Fiji can build a team around him. But
the others won't. It's the only issue. The Bottias, the Naikalevus, the Radradras.
Well, Fiji will never be short on centres. Fiji will always have centres. So that's the one shiny thing. You got Drew Stacey at fullback, who should be around for a while yet. And most of the pack that is with the Drewer is relatively young. I haven't got a side on the Sela, but he's one of my unsung heroes of the World Cup. Started every single game, started most of the warm-up games as well, started every single game for the Drua this year. Nasila Sila is, if the best ability for a rugby player is availability, then Nasila Sila is the best rugby player. Unbelievable. But last slide. So the news came out yesterday or the day before that Simon Railui is not continuing as Fiji head coach. It feels
Can I jump in there, Hugh, for 2
yeah, go
seconds?
on.
And I
Go
know
on.
some people don't like chatting on the podcast. Simon Rowell Louis did an interview with the Roar Pod this week, and he talked about his year with Fiji. He talked about the squad, the players, and his decision to step away. And I must say, I listened to it on the train this morning. It was absolutely brilliant. I do recommend people go, and like, he came across as this endearing type off the field. He comes across like that in the interview. Like he was really, really good. I do recommend people go, and like, he's not being let go. It's not a Vern Cotter situation or anything. He is deciding to step away. And what a 1 year at Fiji he has had,
Well,
because they were
yeah.
so good.
Well, he was the director of high performance or something similar to that. I don't know exact wording of the role. So he kind of gave himself a demotion to be the national men's head coach. But like you say, he was only in the role for a year, and it's like a we hardly knew you type situation. So 10 games, 6 wins, and you have to bear in mind the 4 that they lost was Wales at a World Cup, Portugal at a World Cup. Okay, maybe forget about that. France away in France in a World Cup warm up, and then England in a World Cup quarter final. That's not for Fiji. That's not a bad losses. That
No,
is you can hold your
very
head high after
respectable.
every single one of those. So at like I said, the average rank of the opponent based on today's standings that he played as Fiji coach was 10th, which when you considering for a tier 2 nation, that is high. 32 tries scored, 23 conceded. They walked the Pacific Nations Cup. They absolutely walked it. They had every single game won by half time, and they rotated a lot. And then other achievements: first World Cup quarterfinal since 2007, first win over the Wallabies since 1954, first ever win against England, and it was at Twickenham, and reached 7th in the world rankings for a tier 2 nation. 7th in the world rankings. Like I say, 10 games. What a 10 games. Unbelievable. I honestly think that the creation of the Fijian Drua and what Fiji have done in this last year could be one of the most impactful things to happen in rugby for a long time. And if they get let into the Rugby Championship, I think they don't look back. And I think Fiji are going to be a serious problem. And I love that, in a problem in a good way. Fiji are going to be on the map properly now if they get into the Rugby Championship and if they get into this new World League, which we don't like. But I think if Fiji get let into that, there's going to be some nations regretting letting Fiji in, because I think Fiji are not going to be whipping boys in that. I think they, especially if teams like Australia or Argentina or Scotland or Wales have to go to Fiji to play games. There's not you're going to have to be good to come away from Fiji with a win.
Yeah. And especially when Fiji don't get a lot of home games, if you've to go there and kind of not appeal to them, I feel like that would be a bit too much, because they'll get up for it anyway. But imagine having to
Yeah.
go to Fiji in the first like big test game they've played there in years, and you're maybe a Wales or an England or an Ireland who are coming in a bit undercooked, haven't been playing that well. Jeez, I would not like that. Like,
Yeah.
it's a recipe for disaster, and it's in all the right ways for a change.
Absolutely, mate. I've even when being a Wales fan, even when Fiji lost to Wales in that opening game, I was a bit gutted, especially the way they lost it with Radraja dropping the ball. I was like, I'm glad Wales won, and I don't have to deal with the meltdown on Twitter. But I was gutted for Fiji. So yeah, and personally for me, and when I was making all these stats and things, it was quite almost emotional because I did all the research on them and videos that we've done on the past, which people who are new to the channel just jump into our videos and see all the content we've done on Fiji and really getting to know them as individuals and things. It's been special, and for me to be there at Twickenham when they won that game. So yeah, I'm wearing my Moana Pacifica hoodie tonight, which isn't obviously Fiji, but Yeah. I just hope that this next appointment they do to replace this man, Simon Raya-Louis, it's a huge appointment. And if they get it right, the world is their oyster.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
It's there for them in so many ways, and I do hope it happens for Fiji that they kick on and they do really, really well, to be honest. And it's going to be tough. He's going to be a tough man to replace, but as you said, they're never short of talent either.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about their adversaries. So to give the people at home a glimpse behind the curtain, Caolan messaged me today and said, I have things to say about England. So
This
we're
was
good.
after you invited me on. You didn't invite me on because I think to say about England. Well, doesn't be
So
doing the podcast every day.
we do a bit of England bashing on this channel, and we'll do more in the future. So let's do some today. So what I'll say first is no England back. So I've got all the on the screen here is all of the England starting backline against Fiji, excluding Alex Mitchell, the scrum half. So no England player made as many meters as either Radraja or Naithalevu. Marcus Smith made as many carries as Naithalevu with 10, and Elliot Daly made 9, but none of the rest made as many carries. Most of them to even make.
Tell them how many meters Elliot Daly went for.
Okay, so that stat that I sent you about Elliot Daly was against Argentina, but against Argentina,
apologies.
against Argentina, because it's a funny stat, against Argentina, Elliot Daly on the wing made 5 meters, which for people who don't know rugby stats, wingers get 3 meters. Like 5 meters is like a bad one carry for most wingers, and he made 5 meters in the whole game. In this game, he made 69 meters, which is nice. And like I said, the defenders beaten by the England backline amounts to the same as just the Fijian centres. So, as is becoming the trend now, okay, then the England team has been leaked early, which has happened for pretty much every game since Borthwick came in, really. And it looks like the Marcus Smith at 15 experiment, at least for this week, might be done. Caolan, what do you make of what Borthwick's approach to selection has been since he came in?
Can we call it an approach? Like, does he know what he's doing? I've no strong ties to England. You know, I don't hate them like some people do, but I've no strong ties to them. But I do feel like as much as Eddie Jones crashed and burned in his last few years, he was right about certain things. They were too reliant on Saracens players. The Premiership is not a good league. You can't just turn it on overnight. Like, they're not. The idea that they're in a league where scoring 7 tries a game or whatever that stat from the salary cap report was is unbelievable. I think it was 6 tries a game or something like that. But they can't do it at international level. Probably shows that the Premiership is kind of part of the issue. And I don't blame Borthwick for going there, winning the league with a dull, simplistic style of rugby and thinking, I'll do this with England. The only difference is his Leicester team, to their credit, worked their socks off. I don't know if this England team does. The backline is probably not the greatest example of this because, to their credit, I think Marchant, I think Johnny May, and Tuilagi probably gets the most out of his body that he can. But I don't think Elliot Daly's the hardest working. I don't think Marcus Smith, despite what Kevin Sinfield might say, saying that he's world class, I don't think he's a 15. I don't think Marcus Smith is an international 10. Because you're going to have players like this. I think he's been found out. He's a goose stepper. He's great with ball in hand and all, but you just can't just turn it on. And I don't think Borthwick knows whether he wants to invest in Marcus Smith or not. But
Well,
if you're asking me,
yeah,
he's the 3rd best 10 in England, and he's probably the 4th or 5th best 10 for what Borthwick wants.
Well, let's just look at Marcus Smith's stats as a fullback. So he's got 2 starts as a fullback. Now, if you actually go back and look at it, he's pretty much been playing as a fullback for the last 7 games. It's just for 5 of those games he came off the bench to come on at fullback. So we only saw glimpses. So you take his 2 starts versus Chile and versus Fiji. As you might expect, 2 very different stories. So obviously against Chile, he got 2 tries, a try assist, all of the meters, all of the passes, all of the carries, etc., etc. Against Fiji, this is for a fullback, right? 46 meters for a fullback is a small number of meters for a fullback to make,
It's
given
tiny.
that they're getting the ball kicked to them in acres of space, and they all, unless they're just running to the edge of their 22 and hoofing it back, they all get 3 meters. So normally the highest carrier on every team is the fullback. 10 carries, 5 passes. So this is the thing. If he's coming to the team to be a playmaker, he's making fewer passes than Elliot Daly, who's on the wing. Tackles, he attempted 5 tackles, got 3, missed 2. Now, I am the first to say that tackle stats don't really mean anything, but you know that if you're missing 2 tackles as a fullback, they're probably important tackles. Kicks from hand 2 against Fiji. So again, this is the ball is getting kicked to him, so he's not there to kick if he's only getting 2 kicks. Again, I think Daly kicked more than him. Defenders beaten 1, and I think after he beat that defender, he got tackled by someone else and turned over. 0 line breaks, 0 offloads, 0 try assists, 0 tries, 0 points, and then 1 turnover lost, as I said. This was against Fiji. Fiji are very good, decent defense on them. They are not an elite defense, and Fiji, Marcus Smith by the end of this game looked like he'd been fed through a sausage machine face first, and that was against what is currently a tier 2 nation. He's now going to play one of the big 4.
And the big part is important there, because if now, to be fair, I think he's going to be ruled out with concussion and not making light of that in any ways. But if they went into that game with him at fullback, like, I don't think it'd be a fun day for him. Like Dale Enda and Creel in particular he's been probably the best defensive player at this World Cup. A very weird award to hand out, but he's been defensively unbelievable. If himself or Peter Steph Toy was heading at Smith, and he's kind of dancing across the field, he's getting creeled. Like, there's, pardon the pun there, not intended at all, but it's just the way it is. And I think that England are better with Stewart at 15. I'm not a huge Freddie Stewart fan. I think he does the basics well because he's a big man and all that, but I don't think he's a very good rugby player. But
he's slow compared to what you'd expect from him, isn't he? He's not nimble or quick.
He is the one that Habana was on about. He was the one that was slow on the turn. But listen, he's still a fullback, and you can never replace, in the modern game, you can never replace a guy who's just a good fullback. Same with just a good 10. It's kind of like the Biggar talk about earlier. It's like there is always a place for a guy who's just solid. Fullback, 10, hooker, tight head, and probably 1 second row.
Yeah. Now, with this whole selection of fullback thing, I'm willing to. Having a fly half at fullback is in vogue at the moment. Bowden Barrett is an example of it. Ramos has played 10. He's not an out-and-out 10. Phillimser for the for the Springboks.
Tommy Allen.
Tommy Allen, although let's not talk about that. That didn't go very well. So having a fly half at fullback is a completely legit strategy, and I'm fine with it. Marcus Smith has played 1% of his rugby at fullback, and I'm not. It's not being hyperbolic. If you go on allrugby.com and it breaks out the percentage game time per position for every player they have on that site. Marcus Smith, it says 99% fly half, 1% fullback, and that 1% is all the England games since Borthwick came in. Oh, sorry, since this summer. So talk about learning on the job. Like it's as a selection. If it wanted to be Borthwick's long-term plan, kind of fine. But then, as when Ford and Farrell retire, which is going to be before the next World Cup, who's going to be England's number 10? Because can you name an English number 10 who isn't one of those 3? Like,
no, but that's a different question. It's because I don't really watch Premiership. But anyways.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's Marcus Smith as a fullback. If I just talk about their wingers, for example, so England's wingers, Elliot Daly and Johnny May. Now, the fact that Johnny May wasn't even in the training squad for a while under Borthwick, he got dropped and is now suddenly first choice. And Elliot Daly hasn't played well in any position for about 5 years and is still first choice for England somehow. That's one thing. Neither Elliot Daly or Johnny May have scored a try so far in the World Cup. They played 4 games each, and this was in Pool D. which was the lowest quality pool in the World Cup. It's pretty clear that Elliot Daly is being used as more of a playmaker, so it's not an uncommon tactic to have your two wingers, a playmaker and a finisher. Johnny May is being used as a finisher, but Johnny May is being put in the number 11 shirt, which he's actually only worn for 20% of his career. Okay, it's not a world of difference, but there is a difference between playing 11 and 14. And he's been played in not his favoured side. Like I said, Elliot Daly is being used as a playmaker, but his stats aren't incredible. He's in the team purely for his kicking, and he kicks a lot. He's kicked 12 times and passed 26 times. You compare that to Johnny May, he's kicked 0 times and passed 5 times. So you can see the different roles they are in the team. Johnny May as well, defenders beaten 12, but that's only translated into 2 line breaks. And that's not like they were 2 line breaks where he went past 6 players and was incredible. You probably find that most of those defenders beaten, he was running sideways. And he goes down as a defender beaten, but he's not actually made a significant amount of inroads. So, and if you compare these stats for these two guys to someone like Lewis Rees-Zammit, 5 games for Lewis Rees-Zammit, more than twice as many meters as either of England's wingers, more kicks than either of them as well. So he's doing both sides of that. More defenders beaten, I think as many defenders beaten as both of them put together. More clean breaks than both of them put together. And obviously 5 tries compared to their 0. So this is just an example of how not there England's wingers are. Like, I'm being horrible, but that is my license to do it on my podcast. Johnny May might as well not be on the pitch. He does nothing. So far in this World Cup, he has done nothing for England. Now, if that changes and he scores a hat-trick against South Africa in the semi-final, I'll write a public apology, but I don't think I'm going to be writing a public apology. I just quickly want to refer to this. So this is not mine. So this is Sam Lana. Sam L stands up. I'm sure most people on Twitter are aware of him, a fantastic stats guy. This is how each team uses their wingers. He did a great thread on this. Just search it. I've probably shared it at some point. So if you jump on my profile, you'll probably find it from there. This talks about where teams are using their wingers. And so it's percentage of where the wingers do their carrying, whether it's from between the touchline and the 15-meter line, and it's how much ball they're getting. So England's wingers are getting around 12% of the team's carries, and 65-ish% of those carries are happening on the wide channels. And yet, so they're still very deliberately being used in attacking places, but the attack isn't coming to anything. You compare that to New Zealand, where their wingers are doing over 20% of their carrying. Or someone like Chile, who are doing over 85% in the wide channels. England are kind of doing average. Their numbers are pretty much the same as South Africa, but I don't even need to check to tell you that Colby's and Arence's stats for South Africa are incomparable to the ones from England. So yeah, that's just my little stats dive on how just when people say that England's attack is bad, if you take out the Chile game, which stat pads them a lot, England's attack is possibly the worst at the World Cup. Anyway, that was that, mate. That was my little stats. That was my PowerPoint. Let's see where we're up to now. This is normally where Enda takes over and saves me. Right. Okay. That's World Cup talk done. Other news. The URC is back. The URC is back this weekend. Best league is back.
With a bang.
With a bang. So probably whilst there's no international rugby, most of the chat on this channel will be URC based, but we will always keep an eye on everything around the world. So a couple of bits of news. For the UK viewers, the URC is still going to be on Viaplay. Obviously, they went bust, but they are honouring their contract, which is to broadcast every game this season, and then you can still catch games depending on where you are at. It's either on S4C or BBC Wales or BBC Northern Ireland or BBC Alba, which is the Scottish version. There are free to air some games, and then all games are on Viaplay. And it's not, of all the streaming platforms, it's one of the cheaper ones. Everyone's got a different budget. If you can't afford it, it's not for me to say. But as streaming platforms go, it's one of the least expensive ones. What channel is it on in Ireland, mate?
Ireland is RT and TG Carr for the Cúpla Focal á Scailge. And I believe, now my maths could be terrible at this, I think it's something like 56 out of 62 games involved with the provinces are free to air in Ireland. And the only ones that aren't are the Ulster games. Not exclusively, but you know what I mean. Ulster against maybe Zebra or something like that. So it's very good. And we get a scattering of other games. I think we had like Scarlets down in South Africa at one stage last year, and things like that, especially South African games. So probably if there's a winner from these contracts, it could well be the Irish viewer, because if you're getting to see Connacht, Munster, Leinster guaranteed every weekend, I should probably say Republic of Ireland viewer, you get to see them every weekend guaranteed, only on 2 channels. It's a great way to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is interesting about what things. Okay, if anybody listening to this is perhaps outside of UK or Europe and isn't sure why Ulster games might not be available to watch, Google it. And then let's
I'm
not
not
go
going into that. Don't even try.
So anyway, so other bits of news. So there's not much we can talk about at the moment, and it's probably something we'll spend more time on another pod. There are rumours of a women's URC being put together. We don't know any details on it. Whether it would be a women's team of all of the URC's teams, I don't know. I would think that might be a
I don't
little
think
bit of
so.
a stretch. I know all of the Irish provinces have got women's teams and they all played each other over the summer, but I don't know if that's important. And if there was one thing, look, the women's team don't need to listen to me, but if there's one thing that I would say to them is feel no obligation to copy the men's game. Do your own thing. Come up with your own solutions.
Like rugby and football or soccer.
Yeah.
Don't try and copy it, because you probably can't.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that, and you'll be the first to hear about it if there is a women's URC, and we will all watch it. So the thing that's changed, this came out a few days ago, is European qualification has changed. So it's now the top 8 of the URC qualifies for Europe. So there is no national-based qualification. So before it was whoever is top of each shield. So it was guaranteed to be a Welsh, an Irish, a South African, and a Scottish or Italian team, because the Scottish and Italians are in the same shield. That's no more. So probably the likelihood is that there will be no Welsh qualifier based on how we expect the regions to go this year in the Champions Cup. What's your thoughts on that, mate? Because I know one of the people who were most upset about the geographical qualification was the Irish, because your 4 teams were good enough to all qualify on merit, and normally Connacht didn't.
Yeah, no, I'm happy enough with it. I would like to add, if original rumors, I don't know what was reported this week, because when I seen it, I'd heard it all before. But when the original format was devised, there was talk that they need a unanimous vote if they were going to keep it, because it was basically a split decision when they voted in the first place to go with the Shields format. So I can't imagine there was a unanimous vote the other way, to go to the pure meritocracy. But I do think, zooming out, and I don't mean this in any way to disarm Welsh fans or regional fans or even Scottish club fans or Italian club fans, but I think it's probably better off. I think you could even argue that the Challenge Cup is probably better for like teams. So was it 24? So teams 25 to 30, then the 20 to 24 is in the Heineken Cup, because a lot of teams just don't take that seriously. And the Investec Champions Cup, as we should be calling it, I refuse to. It's the Heineken Cup. Like that's a dwindling asset at this stage. So is pure meritocracy good? Yes. Is it perfect? No, because more than half of the English league is going to be qualifying. Was it like 8 from 10 or something like that?
8 from 10.
Yeah.
At time of recording.
Yeah, probably important to note. Like that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
This is my point. You can't argue against all the Connacht fans, or whether it might be in the future like Lions fans who say like, oh, hang on a minute, we're better than you, so how can you get our spot?
Yeah.
But I can't really have that conversation while there's 8 out of 10 English teams get it. So I'm like, how come one Welsh team getting in is a problem, but like Bristol and Bath getting in isn't a problem, and they are when they're crap.
Well, at the end of the day, why is it called the Investec Champions Cup? And I can tell you one thing for sure: it's not because the Irish are the Welsh clubs. So that's where we are. We're into season 10 of the EPCR era, and if you can tell me one positive thing that they have done, I would be pleasantly surprised, because it's been one backward step after another, and that's one of them. The fact that English clubs have 8 qualifiers. I think if anything, it's worse, even just so far as they're not even repaying their debt in this regard. They're not showing up. Like, you have the likes of Northampton or Gloucester, and I don't mean to paint Gloucester in a bad light every time, but they're the most high profile example of sending over minnows teams. I was like, that's just not good enough, lads. Like, especially when you're being given a freebie into Europe at this stage. So listen, it's not perfect for the URC. I think it's better. And I do like the fact that the shields now are going to be purely it's going to be purely for those games. It's not going to be, okay,
Yes.
Leinster finished top, so they win the Irish Shield. It's going to be, okay, did Leinster beat all the other provinces? And for last year, because I kept track of this, they would have walked it, the Irish Shield. I think they went 6-1-6, lost none in the regular season, if I'm right.
Because the semi-final doesn't count?
No, unfortunately, not for the dub cap, it doesn't. But for the season before, I think they'd have only won it on their last Interpro. And that's Leinster. So, like, imagine how competitive it's going to be in all the other shields where, typically we assume Leinster are going to win 15 of the 18 games.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be very competitive.
I think I worked out, it'll be on my spreadsheet somewhere. I think I worked out who would have come out on top for the Welsh teams if it was just each other. I think Scarlets come bottom. I think because the Dragons beat Ospreys and Scarlets. Dragons have got a thing over us. Anyway, so let's do that then. So let's predict winners of each shield this season. So let's start with the Irish Shield. Are you backing your guys to be the Shield winners?
No, I'll go with Leinster. I have Leinster, Stormers, Munster, Ulster as my top 4 in the URC this season. So I'll just get that in now. So I think Leinster win the Irish Shield, and I might as well just go around the room. I think Stormers, if not the Bulls. The Bulls are just one of those teams you just can't bet against them because of that style of rugby.
So the Bulls are my pick. The Bulls are my pick because they've been very active in recruitment. So Willie LaRue plays for them now, and I think there's a few other players who've joined them as well. So, and I've heard, talking to some South Africa fans, that the Stormers had a bit of a wobble financially. In the summer,
they needed a vote to keep them kind of going.
Yeah, and then the Sharks should win it based on the squad they've got, but for whatever reason they don't. And then the Lions are, unfortunately, the weakest South African team. So I'm going the Bulls for the South Africa Shield.
Yeah, that's fair. I have to go Scarlets for the Welsh one, don't I? No, I do. I can see a good Scarlet season, if I'm being honest. And I'll go with Glasgow to win the Scottish Italian, even though that pains me.
I disagree on the Welsh one.
Okay.
If the Ospreys don't win the Welsh Shield, it is a massive underachievement. The Ospreys squad, you'll hear Ospreys fans talk about how they lose so many players to Wales and how, Owen Jones is left and Rhys Webber's left and blah, blah, blah. The Ospreys squad is comfortably the best in Wales. And the fact that they finished where they finished in the URC last year, behind Cardiff, behind the likes of Connacht and Benetton, and I'm not sure if they finished behind Edinburgh, but close to Edinburgh, is ridiculous. That Ospreys squad, Ospreys in their home matches should win every game. I watched a Ryan Lowe video, a slightly old one, the other day, and he said, like, how is this team not unbeatable in Swansea? Because their squad on paper, if you read it, is unbelievable. It is.
Can I give a bit of a dig as to why they're not unbeatable in Swansea?
Go ahead.
They don't have an atmosphere like
hey,
you can't
they
build a
give
fortress.
Away thousands of free tickets to school children.
Yeah, and that's great and all, but like they're probably going to have more of a fortress when they go to London than most of their home games. So, I love the Ospreys, but like that's just not sustainable.
They're looking at potentially moving. Is a rumor that they're looking to move to a smaller ground, which I think most people would be in favour of.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. But based on the squad that they've got, the Ospreys should comfortably win the Welsh Shield. Right. So that's our URC preview. Now, we could predict the league, but I don't want to predict a winner because I think your team, Munster, and my team, Scarlets, have proved that the best team doesn't necessarily win the URC because of the 8-team playoff format. What's your opinion on large playoffs? Is it exciting and brings excitement and means that more is to play for on all the games, or is it less sporting in a way?
I think when you look back on the URC season the last 2 years, it's proven to have worked. Like, we've had one blowout in the knockout games. And yeah, it got highly talked about when Leinster hammered Glasgow. But like, Leinster hammering a team in the RDS when a team doesn't show up, like, night follows day. Like, it just happens the whole time. I have no problem with it. I think it does keep it competitive. You look at last year, we had Leinster against the Sharks. Yeah, Leinster won that by about 20 points. But you had Connacht, who finished 7th and scraped into the playoffs, granted with a week to spare because of results and all that. Went up to Ulster and won. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it was second against, second would have got a bye. If you went 6th against third, it would have been different then. Do you know? And then 4th against 5th. So I think it was actually really good to see. And I think it was good for that reason, to prove that quarterfinals can work. And it makes for a great weekend of rugby as well. You know,
True.
maybe it's just a quarterfinals thing at the moment, but it did make for good rugby. You don't need it to be top 4. I think Premiership needs it to be top 4 because now they're at 10. Because 8 from 10, like, who would ever think 8 from 10 should go through to anything? And France, I think France have hit the sweet spot with their system because of the importance of even how they do like the semi-final draw and things like that, with the extra day being kind of important there.
And
for the team.
They've got relegation and the relegation access game as well.
Yeah.
So they've got
they have a system that works. I think the URC have found what works for them. And listen, income is important too. You know, I understand that the clubs who are typically in the top 4, not always teams who are struggling for income, especially, you know, Leinster, Ulster, Munster to a lesser degree. But it does make a difference. You know, if the Bulls, say, came 3rd and they drew the Stormers, they get a crowd. Like, they get a very healthy crowd. We've seen it with the Stormers home games last year in the playoffs. Jeez, they nearly sold out the place. You know, so I'm a big fan of it. And maybe not, I wouldn't have been at the start, but I am now. I think it works.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I can see both sides. I can see how, because like I said, Scarlet's benefited from it as well, where we scraped into the playoffs and then won the thing. I can see how it makes the first third of the season kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But then club rugby is not the be all and end all. You shouldn't need your big stars to be playing 25 games a year for it to be feasible, or 25 club games. So does that make a difference?
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, speaking of club rugby, let's run down some of the results that we've had this week. So first, I'll talk about something that isn't club rugby, which is WXV. So this was on all over the place, all over the world. It's not all held in one location, and it meant that it was different broadcasters. I think anything that's not broadcast in your region, you can get on Rugby Pass TV, which is free, but you do need to sign up for it, put your email address in and things.
It's ridiculous. Anyways, go on.
And it was all funny kickoff times because it was all around the world. So there's some at night, there's some very early in the morning. But these are the results. Italy beat Japan. This is in WXV2. WXV1 starts this weekend. So WXV2, Italy beat Japan. Scotland beats South Africa. There's a great clip of a tackle in that game that if you go on to, I think it's either Rian Lowe or Jared Wright's Twitter, you can see the clip of it. Absolutely. The poor thing got absolutely monstered, but the commentator loved it. And USA beat Samoa in what was quite a close game. And there's actually a link there because there is a big Samoa community in USA. So there's actually something a bit more to that game than just 2 random countries. And then WXV3, Ireland put 109 on Kazakhstan, which I think kind of shows like the weakest team in the Six Nations is still stronger than the strongest team from other places.
It's very poor from World Rugby, in my opinion, because we were talking about the Six Nations and the imbalance at the start of the year. Well, like, if you're putting up Ireland or even if, say, it's Italy next year, hopefully Ireland don't finish last, or Scotland, and you're putting them up against a team like Kazakhstan, like it's actually unfair. And I don't mean that in like a arrogant kind of way, but like World Rugby won't grow the game with 100-point games.
Yeah,
And,
agree.
you know,
Anyway, so there's that one. Fiji beat Colombia and Spain beat Kenya. It is nice to see different teams. This is what I'm saying about the women's team. Do something different. Don't do what the men did. Do your own thing.
it's more like sevens, and that's why sevens is marketable, because you have different countries. You have that kind of festival atmosphere. I understand it's a weekend event, but like realistically, if I'm being really honest, I'd have loved to seen these games being played in London or something and have them around a few grounds. I understand the Premiership came back last week, would have made it difficult. But if you had these on in, say, London or around London, and you had, say, England's game on in Twickenham, you had Ireland's game in the Stoop because they're Ireland, you had Italy's game in Allianz Park, you had Wales playing in, I don't know, maybe Brentford. I'm just giving random examples here.
Yeah.
That could have been something you could have done, and not having it on Rugby Pass TV almost exclusively. But listen, World Rugby and growing the game doesn't really go together, even if they say it does.
Yeah, I see that. Also, I think maybe we need to think about what time of year we hold it, because whilst I know it's difficult anyway, so there was no real right way to do it. But whilst the men's Rugby World Cup is going on, and like you say, all of the club season is getting back underway, and you've got things in the UK like the English Football Premiership and things happening, maybe October isn't the best time to hold it. Maybe find another gap. Anyway, it's the first year of it. We'll give them this year's grace. They'll learn from it. I'm sure they'll do something different next time.
No.
Anyway, Pro de deux. Tafts abroad. Sam Davis scored all but 2 of Grenoble's points as they still managed to lose. He scored 2 tries for them. Nicola Martins and Raphael Storti are back scoring in the Pro de deux already. Literally, they just, I don't know if they would have got a taxi, I suppose, from wherever they were in France to go and play for their Pro de deux. Neither of those two are going to be playing in the Pro de deux for very long. They are going to be signed by someone big soon.
They'll be in the top 14 next year, 100%.
Yeah, and it was Marquez actually who gave Storti the score. If you search it on, actually, if you go on the Pro de deux YouTube channel, they have SI de la Week or whatever they call it,
Yes.
and they have a compilation of all the tries. So it's really good. Pro de deux is actually more engageable than some other competitions, and it's in French. So yeah, they scored. Marquez picked up the ball, and he had a clear run in front of him, but he gave it to Storti, and Storti scored it as well. So the Portugal lads combining there. Van are still top of the league after beating Dax. Welsh Prem, Llandovery finally got beaten by Ebervale. Ebervale are now top of the league. RGC also got their first win of the season by beating Swansea, so they're off bottom. All Ireland League. Do you ever watch the All Ireland League? Do you know anything about it?
Not as much as I should. I won't lie, because I'm kind of between where I live is kind of between a couple of clubs, so not really connected to one. But realistically, there should be more AIL. It's actually a really good standard. It's probably, I think the top of where it is probably higher than what the BNI Cup was, which, considering it's a club game, is decent. You know, and with my kind of untrained hat, Turnier and Clontarf are probably going to walk back and win it, because if you've seen the Turnier's signings list this year and compared it to, you know, anyone who kind of follows club rugby in Ireland, you'd realise probably a bit of a money aspect to this. But listen, they're
I'm assuming they're
flying
Dublin teams. I'm assuming
they're both Dublin, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Shannon are currently top, but it's only 2 games in, so I wouldn't read anything into them. Right. Super Series in Scotland. Ayrshire lost to Heriots. Ayrshire is still top, but the gap is only 2 points, and there's 2 points in hand, 2 games in hand, for Heriots. So they're probably going to go top. Future 15 are still winless. They got beat 78-0 by Stirling Wolves. NPC, Taranaki got to the final after beating Canterbury, and Hawke's Bay surprised Wellington, who had been top for most of the year. They're now going to play the final. I want to say that's on Saturday morning. You can watch that on Sky and Now TV in the UK. I'm not sure what the Irish deal is. everyone jump on
It's
Enda's
it's
Twitter.
Sky for us as well. I'm just happy that I think it was Tasman that Alex Nankerville was playing with. I'm just delighted they're knocked out because he's now in Limerick. So listen, I'm sorry to the people of, I believe it was Tasman, but selfish.
Oh, well, I liked Tasman because they had more Pacifica players playing for them. Anyway, so yeah, so that's, I believe, Saturday morning. So it's always a nice way to start your Saturday. And then finally, English Premiership is back. Exeter battered Saracens 65-10. Saracens actually learning what it's like to play with a real squad these days.
Jesus.
And Ben Spencer
Go on.
scored a hat. Ben Spencer scored a hat trick for Bath, or we should call them Caolan's Bath because you're a Bath fan this year.
Stop now. I'd like to clarify this because people think this as well. I'm not necessarily a Bath fan. I like Bath because they're a club with history, and I like Johan van Graan as a person. That's about it. And Johan van Graan has proved that he can get consistency out of a team. And you know what? If he can get consistency with Finn Russell, that would be some achievement.
That Finn Russell move to Bath makes sense for Finn Russell's accountant and Mrs. Finn Russell and probably no one else. Because if you're getting your money, who am I to argue? But yeah. Anyway, enjoy your Ferrari, Finn. Anyway, that brings us to the end, guys. No TV guide today. Stay tuned to socials. It will all be shared there. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Caolan, for stepping in and saving the
No
day.
problem. It's good to be on.
And we'll hopefully welcome back Enda next week. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy your week and enjoy your rugby.